Many of us have those stubborn pounds that seem impossible to lose, no matter how good we eat or how hard we work out. My solution is PlushCare. PlushCare is a leading telehealth provider with doctors who are there for you day and night to partner with you in your weight loss journey. They can prescribe FDA-approved weight loss medications like Wegovy and Zepbound for those who qualify. Plus, they accept most insurance plans. To get started, visit plushcare.com/weightloss. That's plushcare.com/weightloss.
Empire. Playing careers meet a modern stock market.
Everybody profits off of athletes except for athletes, really. Like, they make money, but they don't make as much money as is really available to them in the time that they are athletes. And fans are rabid now. I mean, they've always been rabid, but they're rabid and they're smart.
That's Parker Graham, co-founder of Vestible, who is building a new marketplace where the value of player perform market conditions. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. A lot has changed in the short time since Parker Graham and his co-founder Yves Batoba were playing college football. NIL has changed the financial landscape for the athletes themselves. But with that door opened, they are now developing a new form of investment strategy for their peers. Our guests this week are Yves Batoba and Parker Graham, who are with Vestible, which is a first-of-its-kind athlete investment platform that allows investors to participate alongside real athletes in the trajectory of their careers. And their first IPO was of the outside linebacker of the Denver Broncos, Baron Browning. Hi, guys. How are you? Good to meet you.
Hey, glad to be here with you, Bram. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, Bram, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, tell us a little bit about Vestible, the background, and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so Vestible is kind of the brainchild of Yves and I. We've been working on it for the last couple of years, and really we saw around the crypto mania and NFT mania that was a couple of years ago. Yves and I really came together and figured out, you know what, we didn't really think that these NFTs were going to work. We didn't really think that crypto was going to work at scale. I think that's up for debate still on the crypto side. But we did see there was a lot of underlying fandom that was driving so much value for so many of these things, these assets. And we basically had the idea of, we've always talked as fans of player stock going up and stock going down. Could we create an investment platform that really allowed you to do that, but not just create one that's fake, that, whether it's gambling or if it's, a crypto exchange? Could we really create something that's federally licensed, federally regulated with the SEC, and bring it to life? And that was about 2 years ago when we started on that journey. And we launched our first athlete in the first.
Yeah, and I would add too, I think, just having been in locker rooms in college, having been in locker rooms in the pros, I think by far one of the number one topics that is discussed is just the topic of finance. So you take that and you take just the average consumer nowadays. I mean, investing has become, more and more popular than at any time in history, right? So just the perfect marriage between, athletes, understanding finances, understanding stocks, fans and supporters wanting to be a part of those athletes' journeys. And we're that market that blends it all together.
Let me go back to the idea of stocks going up, stocks going down. What exactly do you mean by that? Do you mean by their earnings? How are you describing an athlete as a stock?
Well, so, I don't know if you've ever thought this, Bram, or said this out loud, but we see it on ESPN all the time, like what players, performance is going up,
Yes.
What their stock is rising, right?
Yep.
What we did is we took, that kind of concept and brought it to life with this investment platform. So how stocks rise for these athletes, what we do is we have an athlete sign a brand agreement with us, which is basically an agreement that the athlete signs away a portion of their on-the-field income to that brand agreement. We then take that brand agreement and we securitize it as an asset with the SEC. So just like you can invest in Google, Apple, and Facebook, you'll be able to invest in these brand agreements that represent income from, the next Pat Mahomes, the next Travis Kelce, name your famous athlete, right? We sell shares in that brand agreement to fans, and that brand agreement then starts trading like a stock because fans can buy shares initially and then sell out of those shares to other fans back and forth to the point where once we have, 100 athletes, 1,000 athletes, Now you have a true stock exchange, just like the New York Stock Exchange, except as opposed to investing in companies, you're investing in individuals.
Okay.
So that's kind of how that works.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about market conditions then, because let's say Barron has a double-digit sack season and therefore is now in line for a pretty large contract. Does that change the trading of the stock, his literal performance, or just interest in buying and selling the stock? Explain the market conditions based around performance.
I mean, it's exactly like the market conditions for buying and investing in a company, right? So if an athlete has a great season, theoretically, you would think that investors would then want to put more money into that athlete because they're performing and they're going to get a big contract, right? That doesn't mean that will actually happen. We see all the time where companies are trading at, 100 times their PE ratios. They're trading at incredible ratios, even if they're not even profitable, right? So the reasonable investor would tell you that yes, as they're performing and their performance on the field is getting better and better, their stock should theoretically rise because you have fans that own those shares. They're selling those shares in the market for a higher price than they bought it for. That would then take the share price from, let's say, $10 a share to 12 to 15 to 20.
Yes.
And the inverse should work as well. So if they're not performing well, or if they're not looking like they're going to get a good contract, then you might see a sell pressure down where people are selling their shares for less than what they bought it for to get their money out, right? The reality of stocks and the reality of investing in general is just that it's irrational, right? So we really don't know what's going to be driving the stocks up and down. It could be theory based on some other principle that we're not even seeing right now. It could be people think that, Barron had 2 bad weeks, we're going to have a lot of sell-off. Well, actually, you might see a huge buy opportunity because people are making a bet that he's going to have a great next 6 games based on who the Denver Broncos are playing, right? So you'll see those things kind of counteract each other in the market in real time.
You were both ex-athletes. You both played in D1, and Parker, you made it to the NFL. Yves, let me start with you. Like, had you thought about something like this as a player? Like, was this something that was kind of crossing your mind then?
Yeah, no, I would say as a player, my thought process, being a DB whenever I was a collegiate athlete at Oklahoma State was, hey, I'm putting my body on the line here every single week, really throughout the year, because, football never ends. And, there are so many people that get to benefit from this. Back in our day, by NIL, right? So without NIL, you're just looking around and you're just like, man, everybody gets a profit off of this, and I'm not even going to get an opportunity here at the next level. So I knew that there had to be some type of change, right, to where, hey, maybe there's something that I can do or something that can exist to where we be able to benefit off of this as well. So at the collegiate level, I'm thinking that. Whenever I transitioned as a working professional, and I was working for the Miami Dolphins in their front office, and just being around the locker room, I mentioned number one topic of discussion by athletes is finances, right? And I always think to myself, hey, you have, the rookie minimum in 2024 is going to be $825,000, right? So, Chris, if you're 21 years old, you get $825,000 living in Miami at that, right? You might have made some bad decisions, right? At least I think that I would have made some bad decisions. So, the discussion always came back to this, who knows how long you're going to play? But in the period that you are playing, hey, can we make sure that you're maximizing everything possible out of this game, especially financially during that short shelf life that I actually have of being a pro athlete? So now years later with Vestible, what we believe is we're giving athletes that opportunity, and you're also giving their fans the chance to benefit from it as well.
Parker, go back to your experience. Yeah, go back to your experience too, Parker. How did you think about this from a player perspective, now moving into an entrepreneur perspective?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, the first thing that came to my mind was Dez Bryant. I don't know if you remember Dez Bryant, Bram, but perennial all-pro wide receiver, played with Yves and I when we were at Oklahoma State. And you walk into a stadium on a Saturday, and there's 60,000 fans, probably 30% of them are wearing a number 1 jersey.
Yeah.
And when you see that, you realize, oh, wow, brand value really matters.
Right.
Dez Bryant's brand value really matters. And Dez made $0 off of every single one of those jersey transactions, right? In that moment, right then and there, you instantly realize, and thankfully now, as Yves mentioned, NIL's here and it's changing the game, and we're kind of moving towards this new collegiate model where athletes are going to be compensated for their brand value and for their value on the field. But when you see that in reality and you hear constantly every single coach in the locker room is telling you, you're a business, treat yourself as such. We didn't really have a way to monetize that. I didn't have a way to monetize that. I was only getting one meal a day 4 days a week back then, right? Like now these guys are getting all the meals, all the cars, all the things. It's very different. But the reality of the situation is still there. Everybody profits off of athletes except for athletes, really. Like they make money, but they don't make as much money as is really available to them in the time that they are athletes. And fans are rabid now. I mean, they've always been rabid, but they're rabid and they're smart.
Yeah.
There's this new kind of, and we can see it clear as day, there's this new want and need to get as close to an athlete as possible at multiple inflection points of their career. And so really the whole thing here is taking all those experiences that Yves and I saw, felt, were a part of, and then bringing this new 21st century way of creating fandom in a radical new way that gets us really excited every single day. So that's really the uniting all of those different theories and experiences into one is really what Vestible is.
Let me go back to the stock market portion of this.
Yep.
When you go to the players and you explain the opportunity to them, and even by your own admission, having a great season and then in turn getting rewarded contractually because of performance on the field won't necessarily change the value of your stock. How do you kind of go through the opportunity for the athlete to be involved?
Well, so the athlete stock value doesn't necessarily matter to the athlete. The way that our platform works is we really treat the athlete as a company. So when we do our first initial offering with the player, let's say we're raising $1 million for the player. They're taking home $800,000. 80% of the offering goes to the player. They take that, put it aside, do their business ventures, all the things that they're trying to do to grow their business. 20% stays investable, paying for audits, all that fun stuff. And from that moment on, their shares are trading at what they're trading at, right? And it doesn't necessarily matter to the player what their stock value is. What matters to the player is that compensated, which is the first step in this process. After that, like I mentioned, those shares, those collective shares own a percentage of that athlete's income. And so as that athlete's ascending or descending, they're paying their investors back through Vestible, that portion of their income. So let's just call it 1%. 1% is going to their investors, whether they have a 6-sack game or a no-sack game, that check that's getting cut, there's a portion of that going to the investors. So the athletes don't necessarily care about it from after the offering time frame, the stock price specifically.
Yeah.
Really what they care about is that first initial kind of ramp up period. As we grow, we're going to continue to make pieces of the platform that create a lot of excitement with the athlete, but we really can't discuss those right now just because it's not ready yet. But that's really to the athlete, this is a brand new revenue stream for you. This is a way for you to monetize your brand right here and now. And that's what gets them the most excited about it when we talk to them.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds, and I'm here with Keith, co-star of my upcoming film, If, only in theaters May 17th. Do you want to tell people the big news? All right, I'll do it. Sign up now and you'll get unlimited for $15 a month and 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan on us. MintMobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 equivalent to $15 per month. Unlimited over 40 gigabytes per month. Face lower speeds. Videos at 480p. Active Mint customers by 531.24 get 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan. Auto renews after 6 months. Offer ends May 31st, 2024. Separate Paramount Plus registration required. Terms and conditions apply if rated PG.
Future Sport is a presentation of Empire Media, a B2B and B2C podcast and digital company dedicated to making your business or brand be heard. Internal or external content creation that will have a lasting impact on your strategy, consulting, creation, and production, all to help you effectively communicate your message in any marketplace. Learn more at empiremedia.com, AMPIRE media.com. This is a new way of engagement, obviously, for fans. How are you going about introducing it to them and getting people interested in participating in it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, look, right now, there's the most sophisticated fan that we have ever seen, right? I mean, you have podcasts, you have blogs, you have websites that are out there that talk about, film breakdowns, that are talking about, next contracts, that are talking about the salary cap and how the Saints versus the 49ers do their salary cap differently, right? So we have the most knowledgeable fan. And, nowadays you have, guys who say, I knew that Kirk Cousins or Dak Prescott being 3rd and 4th round picks were going to be as good as they are right now. But there's no way to prove that. Like, how do I actually go and prove that? But now you can say like, oh, actually, I invested in this stock way back when as a proof point. So that's, a really fun aspect right there. And, just the fun of, hey, I'm actually getting rewarded for my knowledge as a fan by getting paid, distributions and getting some, possible investment gains as well.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, Bram, we are also looking at, for us, where are these athletes? Who are their nucleuses? What are the communities that are surrounding them already? The great thing is that college and pro kind of go hand in hand from a fandom perspective. So we're able to, get their fans excited about where they've been and pretty much the people who are continuing to follow them. Social media is a huge component of that, right? I mean, all these fans follow all of these athletes that they're interested in. So that's kind of a buyer's market for us to just go in and tap into. And that's really where we find the most fan engagement and getting the people the most excited about doing this with their athletes that they already follow and already love.
You mentioned something early in the conversation about watching NFTs kind of come and go. Yeah. And this was part of the genesis of thinking about what you wanted to do in this space, but not going in that specific direction. Can you talk about that a little bit, about like thinking about that, the boom that it was? I don't know if bubble's the right word to put it, but certainly things have changed in that marketplace for that. How did you think about that led you in this direction?
Yeah, I think that this is what happens with technology all the time. People get excited and it balloons up. I don't necessarily, you could qualify it as a bubble if you wanted to, but the underlying issue was that we'll just talk about NFTs for a second. So the biggest problem with these NFT projects was utility versus novelty, right? So you had some NFTs that had a lot of utility where it was treated like a ticket, where like if I wanted to get into the Dallas Cowboys game and have this package, right, you could convert that into an NFT and you could sell that NFT to other people, just like you can do with tickets, but it's a lot more protected, it's more secure, yada, yada, yada. So like that application makes a lot of sense. The ones that didn't were, I have this zombie looking ape thing and it's worth $5 million. Like that's the kind of stuff where it's like, that doesn't seem there's no utility there, right? It's like somebody says that it's worth that and I think it's worth that, so I'm going to pay $5 million for it. So like that was the stuff that Yves and I just kept going back and forth on, man. Like that's not what we don't want to do. NFTs. It's so clouded. It's so cloudy. There's good ones, there's bad ones, there's scams, there's pump and dumps, there's like all these really scammy things that are happening. And we wanted to make something that was so simple and so easy from an investor to get excited about and feel protected. Like that was our number one thing. And so the big difference between like the NFT projects really and us is that underlying utility. What utility means is just that, is there an application for what you're creating? And for us, that utility is that income stream. So yes, we partner with these athletes, and yes, they sell us a portion of their income to their fans. Yes, and all that exists on our platform. Yes, and it's federally regulated. So bringing all those things together into one ecosystem was a, not gonna lie, huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Took us a couple years to do it, but at the end of the day, it just solves all those other problems. It solves all those, am I really investing in a company? Am I really investing in this player? Or am I investing in some guy in a basement and in Lithuania's scam he's got going, right? Like that was the thing that we wanted to make sure that we solved. And in all honesty, it's not just for the fan or the investor, it's also for the athletes. There has been and still are a lot of folks that take advantage of athletes and their people that are around them.
Yeah.
And a huge portion of what we've been building this last 2 years is trust in the market with athletes, with our partners. And that also took a long time. So we're finally at that stage now where we don't get the questions of, oh, this is NFTs. We get the questions of, oh, how many are you going to do this year? And that's the exciting part.
Yeah, simplicity and trust were easily the two biggest factors, right? I mean, whenever, the whole Web3 bubble really was happening and you would go and talk to people about the utility, you might get 10 different answers. And I'm just like, that's just too much. So as opposed to going, deregulated as, the buzzword was, we just said, hey, let's go fully regulated. Let's go and get regulated with FINRA. Let's go and get regulated with the SEC. Something that, people understand, and let's make sure that we're building trust with every single one of these athletes.
All right, last thing. Obviously, you've mentioned NIL. Things are different from when you played, and I think the players can think about a lot of these issues that you're talking about differently. Geez, the state of Virginia just passed a law saying literally the schools are going to be allowed to pay players. They're the first of probably what will be 50 that will fall in however many months or years it's going to take for those laws to change. Just generally, as people who performed as D1 athletes and are now looking at the monetization and branding of athletes, how do you view NIL here, now, and into the future?
Well, Bram, I'm pretty bullish. So I'll let Yves go first. I've got I want some radical stuff out there.
No.
Yeah, Yves, you want to throw yours out there?
No, I mean, look, definitely have some wild takes and predictions, right, about where this whole thing could go. I'm paying a lot of attention to what's happening over there at Dartmouth. I think they just recently released that they actually don't want the unionization to happen, right? And so there's some stuff happening in the courts with the NCAA. Here's what I think. I think there's a story that really flew under the radar last summer where Clemson was trying to exit the ACC, but they weren't able to because they would have had to owe, 9 figures worth of money over to the conference. But they were in conversations with one of these big investment banks about them possibly taking their athletic department and essentially turning it into a business that the investment bank would be able to fund and, get paid, revenue streams from, media, from tickets, from, everything. And as that story came out, there weren't a lot of people that covered it. But in my head, I was like, I think that's the future of where so many of these things are going to go, whether it's going to be, land grants or whatever it is, but to where there are going to be different entities that come in and invest in these athletic departments. And then, the NCAA, I don't think there's going to be necessarily a governing body over the big revenue generating sports. So I think it's just a matter of time until they kind of break apart from the NCAA, at least football. And then you could see men's basketball and other revenue generating sports following soon after. But as of right now, seems like the NCAA just doesn't want anything to do with anything that could possibly go wrong. And they're saying, hey, we're not going to get involved in this. You guys just take it away and, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, just to add on top of that, I mean, I think very radical change is needed and very radical change is going to happen because the cat's kind of been let out the bag, right? And is an absolute stopgap in what will be W-2 income and contracts. Like the players, and the funniest thing to me is that NIL was a construct to pay players to be athletes without calling them professional athletes. Like that's really what NIL was created for. Make marketing dollars based on being an athlete, but we still don't want to pay you W-2 income or contracted income because you're an athlete. And I think that's going to get exploded over the next 5 years. The NCAA is going to be gone in the next 5 years, and you're going to have the superpowers that is the SEC and the Big Ten controlling the sport of college football specifically in some form or fashion. I don't know what happens to the non-revenue teams. I'm not really worried about that. I'm much more concerned about what's going to happen with schools like Oklahoma State who aren't in the SEC or the Big Ten and what's going to happen with those. But that's really where I think this is heading because these athletes create so much value. And at the end of the day, they should be compensated fairly for that. And they're just still, even with NIL, are not compensated fairly for that.
Yep.
So probably could do 30 minutes on that alone, Graham, but for sake of time, we can have that next time.
Next time it'll be. Yves Batoba and Parker Graham are the co-founders of Vestible. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bram, this was fun. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. Enjoy your day.
On the next Future Sport podcast, how one championship plans to grow in the Western Hemisphere.
Backstage, I give a backstage locker room talk to the whole group of athletes every major event. And I talk about their sacrifices and their training and the years of dedication and the tears and the setbacks. And I say, you have your moment here, on the biggest stage in the world. How do you want to express, yourself and think about everyone who supported you, your family, your friends, your team, your major coaches, your country.
That's Shatri Sichitong, CEO of One Championship, one of the fastest growing combat sports competitions in the world. That will do it for this episode. As always, the future is now. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein.